All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good pal, Anne Elizabeth Moore. Anne is the founding editor of Best American Comics, the former editor of Punk Planet, a professor at the Art Institute of Chicago, the founder of Ladydrawers at Truth Out, and the author of several books including Unmarketable, Cambodian Girl, and New Girl Law, all of which and more you can find at AnneElizabethMoore.com and on Twitter at SuperAnne. Anne, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, so Anne, the last time you were here, we talked about the first in the Ladydrawers year-long series on the fashion industry called Our Fashion Year. And you actually just got back from a world tour where you actually found that the fashion industry issues are bigger than you initially expected. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. I mean, one thing that's really interesting to me was that I went on a world tour at all. And that where people want to be talking about these issues are not in the United States. I haven't actually done very many talks about the Ladydrawers stuff in the U.S. at all. And so did just get back from a bunch of dates in Europe and then, of course, in Phnom Penh where, we were talking about how the fashion industry operates and who participates in it. And it was amazing getting perspectives from all of the EU and US led initiatives to make garment manufacturing a globalized industry. And one of the things that we found that was really amazing, well, like for example, I've been working in Cambodia for a long time, 6 years, and I gave a talk on our fashion year in a classroom to a number of young women, upper middle class students, which is a growing population of people in Cambodia as the economy sort of improves there, as does the structural inequities, of course. And this is all largely based on the garment industry's expansion there. And one of the things that happens, of course, I go through the strips and I sort of talked through, in Phnom Penh in particular, how my Cambodian garment industry actually turned into this series of strips. And we're on the 6th one now. And so I talked through, my early fascination in Cambodia with the mass paintings that were going on about 3 or 4 years ago. Could actually still technically continue, but the media has moved on to other issues, of course. And in the second strip in the Our Fashion Year series, which is called Let's Go Shopping, drawn by Julia Gaffer, I went into H&M and I talked to a number of workers in retail fashion in downtown Chicago, protected their identities, of course. But what they told me was that they were actually, sometimes in H&M in particular, the air conditioning was going out and they were fainting on the job in the store. And when I told the young women this in Cambodia, even the young women that didn't work in the fashion industry, that young women that are upholding the international garment trade were fainting on the floor, both in downtown Chicago and in Cambodia, there were audible gasps in the room. People were just blown away that this industry is so consistently destructive of the same population around the world, that young people were getting it, and it was such an amazing moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember that strip from a while ago, and just like people, I don't think really even, people go into malls and they go into shops and stuff like that, but I don't think, people don't realize how crappy and exploitive and hard those actual retail jobs actually are.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the reasons that the sort of what gets called the sweatshop debate, which actually isn't even really an accurate term for how the garment industry works, is intended to have us ignore the really effed up labor policies that happen in the U.S. that support that same industry. And so they end up sort of, diverting attention away from actual local labor issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, what else? I mean, so you were in Cambodia again. You were in areas of Europe. What other kind of connections did you find when you were abroad?
Well, interestingly, I gave a talk also in Helsinki, and then did a workshop with a number of young women that work in comics, and Finland has a really interesting sort of gender thing that essentially you, when you're born, you can be given a name that is either male or female, and then your gender and sexual identity are generally considered to be permanent then and rooted in that name. And so, this makes like statistic tallying really, really easy because there are masculine names and there are feminine names. But it probably makes like individual gender identities kind of weird. Nonetheless, the gender issues that we were seeing in Finland were exclusively about like the hiring of men versus the hiring of women. So a bunch of Finnish comics artists brought me out to talk to them about gender bias in Finnish comics publishing. And they were talking about like feeling like they weren't being supported in their work. And so we did a quick tally of one of the most popular publishers of comics in Finland. And we discovered that they're actually really, really good about publishing exactly the same number of men as women. It was actually 50-50 breakdown.
Oh, wow.
One, amazing, like, publication. And so I was kind of like, maybe you just have, persecution complex or like I was being super judgy about it. And then we also tallied the prizes and awards that are given female comics creators in Finland. And those are going to between like 14 and 17% female creators. And so I was sort of asking more about that. And they were appalled by this. And it is sort of appalling, especially considering that the publishing numbers are equitable. And they were like, well, but that's where the economy is. The money comes from those prizes and those grants and awards. The publishers don't actually generally pay anything. And so the same larger economic issues are sort of being masked by these publishers that are totally willing to support equal number of men and women creators when there's no money behind it. So, looking at that and then some of the other stuff that I found in Cambodia, like, for example, less than 5% of all media across all ranges of work being done in Cambodia is coming from female voices. I started to be able to have these really interesting wide picture views of how, gender global inequity really sits in different places and how we can actually start to have conversations that are both local and international about these issues.